I will also remind you that the base model Range Rover retails at £106,000, and that's a diesel. So expensive vehicles are not the domain of electric cars. So what's the next one on the list that we're told to avoid? Cars are too expensive. Now, again, I think a lot of this is historic, and it dates back to when EVs first came onto the market. Now, back then, a cheap Nissan Leaf was well above the price of a cheap Ford, Toyota, or even a BMW. Battery costs were high, and the retail price of electric cars was much higher than similar fossil fuel cars. But that was 10 years ago. The price of electric cars has dropped considerably. Now, are there still expensive EVs? Absolutely. You try getting a Porsche Macan or a top-of-the-range Audi electric for reasonable money, and you'll be out of luck. I will also remind you that the base model Range Rover retails at £106,000, and that's a diesel. So expensive vehicles are not the domain of electric cars. Now, over the last few years, manufacturers have started to radically reprice electric vehicles. We now have the Dacia Spring at under £15,000 on the road, the fantastic Renault 5 at £21,500, the Renault 4 at £23,400, and the MG4 at £27,245. Now, just for reference, the best-selling car in the UK is the Ford Puma. The all-new Ford Puma Gen E costs £29,995, and that sounds like a lot. But remember, the base version, no frills, petrol Ford Puma is £26,500, but to get one that matches the performance spec of the Gen E, you'd be paying £33,800. Now, my final problem is the one I find most interesting. It's that old chestnut of EVs aren't real cars because they don't have engine noises. They're just iPads on wheels. And I always find this one a bit bizarre. Now, I know there are people out there who equate their manliness to the car that they drive. And that car has to make brum-brum noises or it isn't a real car. Now, remember I drove Porsche 911s for 10 years. I understand the appeal of a nice, throaty roar when you blip the throttle. But if noise is what you're after, you should probably consider going back to steam-powered vehicles because those things were very, very noisy and they had all the vibration and everything. Fantastic. The fact is that for the vast majority of the driving population, noise is something they want to reduce. Having a nice V12 engine that can spew fumes, waste petrol, and kick out a great noise when you floor it is hardly going to be of any use if you're stuck on the M25 in the Friday rush hour, or if you're waiting outside the school to pick up your children. Now, if you're a racing driver and you need the scream of the engine to tell you when to change up or change down, then fair enough. Although the Formula E drivers seem to be able to do that without too much trouble. Little set of lights on the steering wheel. But if you absolutely positively have to have noise and gears on your EV, there are options. Try the Hyundai Ioniq 5N or the 6N. Fabulous car, both of which have integrated software to manage gear changes and engine noise. Now, I tried it at Everything Electric North, and whilst I originally thought it would be a bit of a gimmick, I was very surprised with how well the gear changes had been modelled and how realistic the engine noise sounded. Now, it felt real, it sounded real, and it drove like a demon. Irony, of course, is that using the car in this mode is actually slower than using it in full electric mode, where the red button on the steering wheel will give you 600 horsepower for about 10 seconds, something my 911 couldn't even hope to achieve.